Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to the Ineffable. Here I am, out in nature, and I hope the wind is not too strong. Hello, if you're new, you're very welcome here. I apologise for my appearance. I wasn't expecting to be making a video, but I came out on this walk and just the sun came out and I feel the freshness and I feel the clarity with this space. So this will be a video discussing the next sun sign that we will be passing through shortly, which is Sagittarius. Still in the midst of Scorpio at the moment, and it's been a ride. It's been cathartic, and it's been that bridge of logic and emotion, and sort of logically going through the motions of allowing this stuff to just pass through, just observing what's a true feeling and what's a emotion generated by something external, just observing the change and the shifting in your emotions based on what music you're listening to. And then you can kind of see that emotions are fraught with fallacy and very easy to manipulate and change. And just so as throughout our lives we've been emotionally manipulated in various ways, so too do we attempt to do this with ourselves, and we do it all the time with substances, with situations and people. We try to kind of keep ourselves in one emotion or another and trigger certain ones to come up, but it's really revealing then as to how much of our emotions are just dictated by the mind. So it's easier to allow them to flow and let go, and you feel that consistency and that stability, whether I've got strong biting wind blowing across me or if I've got rain on my head or sun on my cheeks. And there's this consistent place in the middle that doesn't change, and she doesn't change for you either, whether she's set up a camera really well and found the perfect spot, or if she's just casually chatting with you. Scorpio is that disillusionment with what is and what's come before and where you are. There's a disappointment, there's a letting down and a feeling of being let down, and that's a real feeling. It's a real feeling we need to allow ourselves to feel. Often our parents never allowed us to actually just cry about feeling let down, because we were always supposed to be happy about whatever we were given. But the human nature is to have expectations and not have them met. So it's important that we are honest with ourselves about how we feel in any given situation. Honest with ourselves in terms of how we expect others to behave and how we are disappointed when they don't dance exactly the steps that we want them to dance. And an appreciation of certain facts that we don't really honour the free will of others, or indeed of ourselves. Many times we allow other people to contradict our free will and take advantage of that, and it's important to acknowledge all of these things. There are even times in life when it feels like this is necessary, at work, these kind of environments. The important thing is to, yes, learn to be okay in any given situation, but also learn to acknowledge, I feel annoyed about this. Just acknowledging it is enough to just allow yourself to feel that frustration, and then it will just leave. It's when we fight it that we then start feeling bored, or we start feeling anger built up, or resentment, which is the worst, because it's very undercover and covert. So with that being said, moving into Sagittarius energy, and this goes for many of the planets including Venus, Mercury, and indeed the Moon, there'll be a strong conjunction of all of these things happening in the fire sign. It's important that we feel into the nature of Sagittarius for being the most evolved of the fire signs, the most evolved embodiment of fire. This is the hot burning embers. They don't need anyone else. They don't need anything to help initiate them. This is the kind of energy that just surges underneath, and it's very There's no reason for this energy to feel insecure. There's no reason for us to feel insecure at this time. And given that we've gone through what we have astrologically this year and also in the last few years, we are strengthening with each of these. This is scar tissue forming. And whilst that scar tissue hardens, we can soften our heart. And it's a knowing that we can go through anything, which allows us to be softer. So don't allow yourself to get waylaid or embittered. There doesn't need to be the bitterness of Scorpio carried through into the festive season. There's a sweetening and a joyousness, a jolliness, of course, that comes through Sagittarius and the Jupiter archetype, which I'm working through at the moment, the various embodiments of this planet in different archetypes. So I sit here and I talk to you at the start of this new season in the northern hemisphere. It's getting colder, the leaves are oranging here, and the grass is growing back in Spain. And there's a frigidness and a coldness in this season, and a pressing of the festive season, and not all of us have such wonderful relationships with family members, and most of us have some level of dysfunction there. So as always, it's important to check in with your inner parents and how you relate to the masculine and feminine, your initial masculine and feminine that you encountered in your life. And I've lately been feeling the woundedness in both sexes and the emboldened nature of the female now, and the feeling of 1 minute for the plane. The feeling of justification for very angry, destructive behavior, especially towards men, and a sort of ridding ourselves of the male. And this is a feeling that feels very justified. There is a frustration and an anger there, and it was a similar sort of energy which in yesteryear made men feel frustrated and to end up belittling and dismissing women. It's just the same thing in reverse. What do we do with the trauma? What do we do when we wake up in 2022 and realize that you're a woman born in this world with this trauma in your background, in your genetics, in the women around you, in your culture? Be grateful. Be grateful at the humility that we've had to face. How we've been humiliated has actually made us more humble, and therefore more reflective, and therefore more self-critical. This has simultaneously meant that we have very little low self-esteem and low opinions of ourselves, and then fraudulent facades and egos placed on top of that. But in terms of following a path that's more emotionally open and receptive and allowing of these things to flow out of us, we are more humble in that sense, and therefore a step ahead of the men who are very, very limited in how much they are allowed to feel, which emotions they are allowed to experience and express. It's basically anger and lust, and that's it. And the grief and the pain that as women we have been able to silently engage with has never really been acceptable in men. And it's the main thing we all need to come to terms with. There's this crippling, sometimes when the sort of collective themes start emerging and you really feel into your heart how everyone is your brother and your sister, and you look beyond the actions, the behaviors based on fraudulent mentalities, and you just see your brother and sister under there, and you see how they're hurting and how that collective suffering is what has created all of the chaos and all of the ideas on the world that are just dominoes in affecting the collective consciousness and making it more and more fraught with violence and suffering, it's time as women, and I know most people who do watch my channel are women, so if you're a man, hello. And I feel it's not something that we can look to our daddies for. We can't look to the men in society to help fix us, and the majority of those who get involved in spirituality are women, and the majority of the kind of shaman type leaders that supposedly guide us are men still. And it makes sense. The masculine energy is more in a guiding sense, more of a leadership role, but ultimately we need to take the reins of our own lives and have that level of accountability, and we're not sure how to do that yet. We need to forgive ourselves for the kind of strange feminist dynamics that go on, that make us either really want to be men and try and compete with them, or that make us try to shun them, or fall back on them and need saving again. And actually there's another page, another thing on the other, as we turn the page, which we're going to emerge into when men are allowed to sort of slowly open up. But at the moment it's like a plodding along. Even within a relationship, you're doing your own thing. You are working with your own karma, which is not the same as one another. As much as you may want to fully engage and understand your partner's suffering and pain, unless you've really lived through it, you can't. And the best thing to do is to resolve your own struggles through feeling. And no amount of talking about our emotions is going to actually resolve them. This is a thing for women in terms of just allowing yourself to feel them, not always reaching for the phone, reaching for someone else. For men it's the opposite. Men need to start opening up and reaching out, and I'm loving seeing all of these workshops for men and just wonderful things to not be ashamed of being a man, and for being born in the body that they are, the same as we mustn't feel this way as women. And these statements, I see so much men trying to understand women, trying to hold space for women and all of this, and it's focus. They need to focus on themselves. Women need to focus on themselves, and the rest will follow. When you stop needing someone to fall back onto, someone whose arms you want to hold you, then you become your own guide, your own leader. And in a relationship it's not 50-50, it's 100% me, 100% you, all of the time. And having that level of presence is all you can do. That's holding space, just being present. And if in that moment you really need to feel your own stuff, that doesn't mean her pain is more important than yours. You both are feeling something, just communicate that and then get on with it. Things start to feel simple, much more simple, once the emotions are allowed to be moved out the way through feeling them, not through rejecting them, not negating them or judging them or making them more than they actually are, but just allowing them to be. Then you can breathe on the other side, and breathing is so key, so key, to learn how to breathe. So many people don't know how to breathe, and it's normal now. And it's no measure of one's health to be well adapted to a profoundly sick society. We're all working with our own level of sickness in the mind, in the body, in the soul, in our past, and no one else can really get to the heart of the matter of your own self other than you. So there are tools out there are ways to open yourself up, there are different astrological transits which are more conducive to this, and when Sagittarius comes along, there's this optimism, there's this hope, there's this joyousness, and a sense of entitlement to the divine, a sense of, there's nothing off limits to me. I'm just as worthy as the next man. I'm just as worthy of shining, and I'm just as shiny as anyone else, but completely unique. we also have Jupiter and Neptune both in Pisces, so there's this expansion of the dream state. What are you dreaming at the moment? There's a simplification in day-to-day life that can be undertaken in watching less stuff, stripping it back, and having that period of time before you go to sleep very clear, with some intentions about what you would like to understand about your life before you go to bed, so you don't just go to sleep processing someone else's story. And it's much of a purer state of understanding, of comprehending yourself, spending time alone with your own self and the mysteries of your own heart and what's in there. Sagittarius is this coagulation of all the disparate parts of yourself which were being transformed and uplifted and stripped bare in Scorpio, and then coagulating everything together like an alchemist, alchemizing the very best of your parents and evolving the kinds of dynamics which were really unhelpful and limiting and holding you back. And then through that process there's space for forgiveness, but only through acknowledgement, only through seeing the flaws. There are sort of two types of people in this sense: those who never look back and always want to keep plodding forward and don't want to go there about the past, and then those who just live in the past and don't want to move forward. We have to be willing to utilize both and speak with both. It's lovely when you can tune in to the future version of you that is more aware, that is more open, that is more conscious, and then also tune into the childhood parts of you that were wounded. Okay, yeah, tune into how they feel and where they were needing a hug or a hand held or someone to say no and they didn't receive that. But also the parts of you that were joyful and really innocent and really with pure intention just before they got shut down, as the world typically did. And if you're a parent, if you're embarking on being a parent, learn to be your own parent, and then the child can do that for themselves. And it doesn't mean that then you're not present for the child, but it means they have a mirror to imitate in terms of how to look after themselves, their mental health, their inner sense of stability of who they are, knowing who they are. Really, really encourage you to look at the human design, at the very least, if you're having a child, of the child, just to see how the energy is flowing and how they best process emotions, whether they're very, very empathic, whether they need time to feel their own emotions, whether they can kind of rely on their guts to say like or whether they need to just talk and to express themselves and find their own way, as I do, or if they are completely open and receptive, and putting them in an environment which best suits them, best serves them, at the very least. That's a huge gift and a huge sense of progress in terms of raising children compared to how we have done in the last few decades. There's also this ability to zoom out and look at the way that we have behaved as parents throughout the decades, and how one generation tries to correct the last, and how the pendulum swings and makes mistakes in both directions, and just trying to get to that place that's much more central and much more is essentially just dictated by what is actually happening around, not just by reading what was in a book, not by being completely carried by the child, because the child doesn't know. You do have a couple of decades on top of this child, so you have something to contribute. Having controlling, strict parents that limit you is castrating, and having parents that hold their hands up and take no responsibility whatsoever is really, really, really scary. So there has to be something in the middle, and it's not just going for parents, it's also going for yourself, and how you raise your inner self up to, because you may have evolved yourself in one direction or another area of life, but there is always a potential for for growth and development of certain places which you would rather not touch with a barge pole. But they're there all the same, and they exist, and they will come out at the least convenient time when you don't want to see that part of yourself. So, finding a lot of peace through music, a lot of peace through playing my own music and singing my own music and making my own sounds, to release this sort of stuff, to tap into certain stuff, and then not allow the mind to get involved, not allow the mind to come and make a story about why I feel this way, but just allowing whatever feeling is there to come up and be processed. Because whether it's triggered by film or music or the postman giving you the wrong look, anything is there. The fact that you were triggered by it means it exists within you. If someone else tells you their story and you start crying, you might feel, oh, I'm feeling their emotion, but you have that within you. There's a receptivity and a resonance between the two of you, so it's important to just tune into that emotion for yourself. And it's only by feeling, never by thinking. You can't think your way out of this. And Sagittarius is climbing the mountain with joy and with optimism, to get us up to that point where we are really the grandfather of time in Capricorn, and we're able to go to those family gatherings, or have no family gathering and have to sit with that just as Christmas rolls around. So expand out into a wider way of viewing your trauma and viewing your lifespan and your ancestors' trauma and their lifespan, get a greater consciousness of this, and then also your culture and your continent and the history of that and how we ended up here. And there's a lot more space and time and room for a deeper level of comprehension and forgiveness. And then your heart is just lightened. When you have a light heart, you are then open to so much good that's in the world. There's so much good that you can do and you can experience and receive. And a true sense of self-worth would, in a person, would not create dictators. A true sense of self-worth would not create those who want to harm, or those who want to destroy, or those who want to self-harm. And it's one and the same. A point I'd like to end on is that idea of self-harm. It's almost self-flagellation as being a virtue. Harming yourself as being a way of somehow showing what a good and humble person you are. But harming yourself is just the same as harming another. It really is. You're just as important as the next person. Would you do this to a stranger on the street? Would you do this to a child? Would you do this to someone that you loved? And then just try and really, you'll have to feel a lot of pain and a lot of grief about the way that you've treated yourself, because it was wrong. But it's not a sense of it's not another cycle where you then need to punish yourself for this. It's absolutely the opposite. It's, I need to give myself love, I need to be present for myself, and I need to give myself everything I've been holding back, thinking I wasn't deserving or worthy. You're absolutely worthy. You are worthy of all the good in life, all the beauty, all the fresh air you can take in, and all the experiences that are joyful. So thank you so much for being here with me in my windy hair. I'll show you the view I've got now. It's funny, the bare earth just starting to get some green grass coming up, and then the trees just going orange at the tops. It's just smashing. What am I like?